So, ladies and gentlemen, Democrats spent years welcoming in the far left wing of their party, believing they found some brilliant new strategy, make blue districts even bluer, while at the same time making every competitive district and state harder to win. Their socialist wing is knocking off, yes, establishment Democrats and celebrating victories, but control of the House and the Senate will not be decided in downtown New York, Washington, D.C., or Denver. It will be decided in competitive districts and states filled with independent and moderate voters. And now you have several longtime Democrats, ladies and gentlemen, sounding the alarm that their party's becoming too radical, too extreme, and jeopardizing what is supposed to be their blue wave that doesn't look so safe to happen in November as they once thought. And so while there is still much to be decided, this is positive news for Republicans. And so let's start right here.
The civil war within the Democratic Party is escalating tonight. Mainstream party members are trying to distance themselves from progressives and socialists who are gaining traction nationally. There are also growing concerns about veteran lawmakers throwing their support behind these far-left upstarts. Here's congressional correspondent Bill Malugin.
I'm endorsing Abdul El-Sayed for Senate in Michigan.
Senator Elizabeth Warren announcing her endorsement of Abdul El-Sayed today.
Abdul is the only candidate in this race who can build the grassroots movement needed to win in November.
She's the latest high-profile Democrat to back the far-left candidate as Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders continues to campaign with him.
So not only does Abdul support Medicare for all, he wrote the book on it.
Sanders had also supported Graham Plattner in Maine, and his endorsements are beginning to rub some moderate Democrats the wrong way.
Humble yourself, Bernie. You know, you just pushed an accused rapist and imploded up in Maine, and now you're pushing, essentially a pro-Hamas candidate.
The friction is exposing a deep fracture within the Democratic Party, as centrists are now going on offense against the socialists, politicians and pundits alike.
Every day I read about a new person in some Colorado and Wisconsin, somebody who is saying some variation of not defund the police, abolish the police. What world do they think we could possibly live in under these conditions?
I am tired of a set of people on the very far left telling us that in order for us to be progressives, we now have to believe ideas and support ideas that are completely nuts.
And Republicans are happy to sit back and watch the infighting.
The old establishment Democrats who were already the progressives now look like moderates compared to these communists.
And it appears Democrats in Maine will be choosing former state legislator Troy Jackson as their candidate to replace scandal-plagued Graham Plattner to challenge Susan Collins for her Senate seat. Jackson is a progressive Democrat who believes in abolishing ICE and Medicare for all, Brett.
It's fascinating to watch all across the country.
It is.
Yeah, Bill, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, and so guys, don't forget, smash that thumbs up button if you do enjoy the content. For more, subscribe to the channel. But my read on this situation is, this is a situation. Yeah, so my read, and so there you have that. And my read on this situation is that the Democrat Party, they did this to themselves in their thirst for power and control and their Trump derangement syndrome that drove them to believe that it would be a better idea for them not to move closer to the center. No. But for them to actually move further left. After trying to trot out a candidate like Kamala Harris in 2024, who was far left in her own right, and that didn't work when they just basically said, here, you got to vote for her. Didn't even give their voters an opportunity to pick their candidate. Just basically said, this is who you're going to vote for. We chose her for you. And instead of learning a valuable lesson from that error, they decided, let's go and push all of our chips further to the left and go further along with the far left candidates. And so now you have these Democratic Socialists, that's what they brand themselves as, who have taken over the party. And they are not relinquishing control back to the establishment Democrats. And that is a major issue for them moving forward because, in a primary, that plays out pretty well with a base who's going to be energized to show up when, it's not really election season and you got to motivate people to show up and vote. Become a general state election, national election, That's a completely different ball game. And that's why now you have lifelong Democrat supporters like a Van Jones on CNN who went out his way to create this video denouncing the Democrat Socialists for their extremism, speaking up and speaking out. But I don't know. We'll have to see. It may be too little too late. But take a listen to this.
I am tired of a set of people on the very far left in the Democratic Party, my party, telling us that in order for us to be progressives, we now have to believe ideas and support ideas that are completely nuts. I am a progressive Democrat. In other words, everything that's good in our party, I believe in, have believed in for a long time. Do I want universal health care, Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it? Absolutely. If you are sick, you should be able to go see a doctor. That's a good idea. I want free education for everybody as long as they want to keep learning. I think that's a good idea. The Green New Deal, I'm the author of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is my phrase from my first book in 2008. There's nobody more committed to criminal justice reform than me, ecological solutions, the whole deal. These are our ideals as progressives. We should fight for them. We need them now more than ever. But what does that have to do with supporting Hamas? What does that have to do with putting up candidates who say we should have no police, no prisons, we can't deport anybody, even if they commit rape or murder, Israel shouldn't exist? These are terrible ideas. These are awful ideas. Where did these ideas even come from? If we want people to join this party, when people come to the party, you want to give them a wonderful punch bowl of wonderful ideas like this. Who is putting the poop in the punch bowl?
Yeah, and so you got Van Jones right there, and I think it's very fascinating listening to Van Jones speak right there, and what he and Democrats who agree with him don't seem to realize on why they failed and why they lost control of their party and is in the current state that it's in, is that they were outdone by a group of people who were willing and able to be more radical and progressive than they would ever choose to be. And it worked. That's what it is. And so you have Van Jones talking about how he has all these great ideas that he actually is for. And this is what the Democrat Party stands for. Well, yeah, those are radical, big government ideas. More social programs, more big government. And what he does not realize is that he was outdone by a group of people who were willing to go all in, push all their chips into the table. I'm being bigger with their big government. I'm being more extreme with their social programs. I'm being more radical when it comes to their political language and defunding the police and abolishing ICE. They just got outdone by a group that said, we can outdo you in every area and we'll win, at least with our base, because you won't go as far as we will. But let's go ahead and continue.
Dana, this Michigan race has turned into a titanic struggle between Democrats about the future of that state and the future of their party. They've already spent $60 or $70 million against each other on this primary, and they've weakened each other ahead of this general election, where Mike Rogers is the Republican candidate and came within a hair's breadth of winning last time. But it's also a proxy battle for the future of their party. On one side, you have Chuck Schumer backing Haley Stevens in all that the establishment brings to bear and all of their money. And on the other side, you have AOC, Bernie Sanders backing Abdul al-Sayed, bringing their grassroots, their left-wing riot squad, into the state to try to gin up a lot of support. Where it goes from here, I don't know. But to be honest with you, it raises a lot of questions about the future of their party and a lot of questions about what it means for AOC. You know, the winner of this proxy battle wins control of their party, and people are wondering, is AOC going to maybe primary Chuck Schumer in 2028, or does she have something bigger in mind?
And so you have the infighting going on between the Democrat Socialists and the establishment Democrats, and none of this spells good news, ladies and gentlemen, specifically, and we're going to get into this clip now, when you look at past midterm years with the GOP as the president versus this year. And so for all of these primaries that the Democratic Socialists are winning, it's not translating as far as right now with the polls to show that they should be further ahead, specifically when you look at years past. And so we're going to get into this where it's showing you, for instance, 2006 with a 12-point lead, 2018 with a 10-point lead, but 2026 only a 4-point lead. And that's not even considering, as we get into this clip, the redistricting battle that took place and how that's going to affect these midterms. And so for as much as these Democrat socialists claim that these ideas are so great and that they're so grand, sure, in places like New York, Los Angeles, California, and these far blue reaching pockets of the country, they're going to play to a base and they're going to be able to win. But in toss-up states where independents matter, where moderates matter, and where the choice is going to be between a Republican and communists, they're making it pretty easy for independents and moderates to make their choice, at least in my opinion. But let's check this out.
We've been talking about the fact that Democrats might be waking up this morning a wee little bit nervous. Why is that? Well, there's new polling out this weekend which suggests that while they are leading in the so-called generic ballot test, the race for Congress, it's not by much, and certainly maybe not by enough. With us now, CNN chief data analyst Harry Etten. So the numbers show what, Harry?
They show a big worry sign, at least compared to history, because I want to take it back through the history machine, and I want to note, okay, House National July, CNBC, Washington Post poll average, midterm years. This is the generic ballot, right? Where were we back in 2006 when, of course, Democrats would go back on to win the House? They were up by 12 in an average of those two polls. How about 2018? They were up by an average of 10 in those two polls. Look at where that average is now. Well less than half of either the level of 2018 and 2006. Way down there. Yes, they're ahead, but they're ahead. I have to shrink down on the screen. They're ahead by only 4 points, which is significantly less than what we saw in 2018 and 2006 when Democrats took back the House. So, as I said, this is an This is a warning sign. While, yes, Democrats are ahead, not by anywhere near the margin they were in prior wave years.
Because 4 isn't 10.
No.
And it's not 12.
No, they taught me that back in pre-K, that 4 is not 10 or 12.
And not only that, but 4 might not be enough with all the redistricting we've seen.
That's exactly right, Johnny B. So this isn't just, hey, you know what, we want to lead by 8 or 10 or 12 because we want an even larger majority. You might not even get the majority at all if, in fact, the House popular vote ends up by 4. Because just take a look at this. Okay, the Washington Post CNBC poll lead, it's 4 on average, right? But what about needed to control with redistricting? You need probably a 3 to 4 point victory nationwide in the national House vote in order to get a House majority. You are right on the edge with this 4-point lead in the average of the CNBC Washington Post polls, right on the edge of even getting that majority. And that's why I said this is a very worrisome sign. This is troublesome for Democrats because despite all of Donald Trump's unpopularity in the polls, they do not seem to be building an advantage that guarantees them the House or anything close to a guarantee. It's very close, at least if you're listening to CNBC and Washington Post.
And the thing with these polls is I always take these polls with a bit of a grain of salt. They always try to make it sound like Trump is doing far worse than he actually is. But just think about it for a second. President Trump right now, his approval rating is probably not doing as well because, you got the war going on. People just don't like war and they want that to end. The effect that it's having on the economy when it does come to gas prices, that's also going to play a role when it comes to what Democrats can use against him. Not to mention, you got the mainstream liberal media basically constantly on a 24/7 news cycle, constantly against the president. And so you have all these different ingredients, all these different elements that are a strong force to show President Trump in as negative a light as possible. And yet somehow Democrats only have in 2026 +4, which is probably not even +4, but let's just give them that +4. That is telling you just how awful and lost the Democrat Party is right now. Now they're trying to sell you with this Democrat socialism like it's the best thing since sliced bread, but clearly it's not. And even with all the obstacles that the GOP is facing, and some of them are self-inflicted, ladies and gentlemen, let's understand that. Right now we can't even get the Senate to pass the Save America Act. And so it's not like everything is just where you got Republicans overall who are just doing everything right. They're helping President Trump push his agenda. It's not even that, ladies and gentlemen. And so understand exactly what you're looking at when we look at these polling numbers. You're looking at a situation where Republicans aren't even performing up to the standard that they should at this current point with the control they have in the House and the Senate. And still, with all that being said, with all of the odds stacked against the President Trump, Democrats can't grab a stronghold. It's a toss-up. And we'll see come November. But let's continue.
Okay, but given that the president is so unpopular, you just brought that up, why is it that Democrats might not be doing better?
Yeah, that's called, I think I know what question is coming next, and I'm going to lead right into it. Why is it? What is going on? Well, just take a look at 2024 Trump voters in 2026, because I think this is really important. Okay, Donald Trump's net approval rating with them is plus 66 points. But how much is the U.S. House margin? Republicans lead amongst these same voters by 87 points. In other words, there is a chunk of 2024 Trump voters who right now aren't so hot to trot on Donald Trump, but are still very much in the Republican camp. And that, to me, is the worrisome sign for Democrats, because how do you convince those voters to necessarily go over to you? Because it seems to me that their baseline opinion is, I want to vote Republican, even if I don't like Donald Trump. And that's a very tough voter to convert, as opposed to independents who, you know, could go either way. These are people who have shown an affinity for Republicans in the past and voting for Donald Trump in the past. And right now they're showing that exact same affinity to vote Republican in the midterms. And that's why this race is much tighter than I think a lot of Democrats would wish it would be, given Trump's unpopularity.
It's interesting. They're kind of outrunning Trump among Trump voters right now.
That's a wordful, but yes, that's exactly what's going on. They are, House Republicans are outrunning Donald Trump amongst his own voters at this point.
All right, we will watch and see if that continues as the summer and then we get into the fall. All right, Harry, and thank you.
Yeah, and so there you have that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it right here. This is now the new dilemma for the Democrat Party. In their thirst for power, seeking it at any cost, their Trump derangement led them down this path. And so they were willing to give in to even more extreme ideals than what they were comfortable with, but they were willing to do it because it meant stopping Trump, taking power away from Trump. Only problem is they didn't realize that on this path, on this road to taking power away from Trump, is that they would be ousted also. The establishment Democrats would be ousted also. And that's where they're at right now. And that's where they're at right now. Their party in a position where they no longer have control. Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, they don't have control of the party. You have other Democrats like Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris trying to get in where they fit in and simply trying to now morph into whatever it takes in order to gain support from the party. And so, hey, the wind's blowing towards Democrat socialism. Hey, we're all for democratic socialism. And ultimately now they find themselves in a position where come November, it could cost them what should have been, historically speaking, the opportunity for them to at least regain control of the House. And those things don't seem as sure as what they once did. But those are my thoughts on the update. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your comments down below. I appreciate when you guys chime in. Don't forget you enjoy the content. Smash that thumbs up for more. Subscribe to the channel. Until next time.